So I'd like to start by having you look at this slide for just 5 seconds. What do you see? Is there anything wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with this slide. Girls can play with trucks and boys can play with dolls. The media has put an intense spotlight on sexual harassment in the workplace this past year, and it's heinous. And this discussion has not escaped academic medicine. There are many different forms of sexual discrimination, and I would contend that subtle gender bias is an important one. It is very prevalent, and it also inflicts significant harm, and I'd like to focus my discussion on that today. When does subtle gender bias begin? I think it begins in the nursery. There's no question that boys and women are different. But I would like you to agree with me right now that there is no reason that any woman should have her sex be a reason that they are not able to succeed in the workplace. There is good news. The AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, just released statistics that show that in 2017, more women than men were admitted to U.S. medical schools. And this good news continues as they enter the workforce, as women are now approaching gender equity at the assistant professor level. But this is when the bad news starts. Women start to fall off the academic ladder once they reach the rank of associate professor. And there is more bad news as they continue to climb, for only 20% of women have achieved the rank of full professor. As they move into leadership roles, the bad news continues at the dean's level, where only 15% of women are in the dean's office in this country. And when they are in the dean's office, they tend to be in supporting roles, such as the dean of faculty affairs, the dean of education, or the dean of admissions, whereas men tend to take more decision-making roles, such as strategic planning, research, and finance. These are hard statistics, and I would like to tell you more. But before I do that, I'm going to have to tell you, why should you listen to me today? Well, it's because I happen to be a self-proclaimed gender bias expert. For two major reasons. One, I actually have done some coursework. This past year, I was a fellow, an ELAM fellow, as it's called, which ELAM stands for the Executive Leadership and Academic Medicine Program for Women. It's a course run by Drexel University where 50 women are chosen throughout the United States, senior women, to participate in a year-long course where we learn leadership skills and other things. And you can only imagine that when 50 women come together, we talk about gender issues a lot. And so I spent the past year thinking about this excessively. But on a personal reason, I have actually had a front row seat to gender bias. You might call me a case-controlled gender bias experiment. For the past 34 years, I've been married to Tim, who's a pediatric subspecialist at this institution, a pediatric oncologist. Here he's pictured with me in 1984, and again, us in 2018. And I have to admit, we haven't aged a bit. But interestingly, we have been at the same medical school. We were in the same departments of pediatrics. We were at the same children's hospitals. We have the same friends, many of you in the audience. We have the same colleagues. We've even had offices in the same hallway, but our experiences have been dramatically different. And we've learned a lot. And what I've learned is that the glass ceiling is pretty darn thick. And before we break it, we are going to have to do some important things. One of the first things we need to do is address the gender pay gap. Take a second and take a peek at this cartoon, because I think it says things better than I could ever say them. I think we all know that that this is a problem in this country, and it's a problem that we're going to need to address before gender equity is achieved. I'd also like to say that workplace invisibility is a problem. take another peek at this cartoon for a couple of seconds here, because I think it says it better than I could. And I would like to probably have you all agree that there isn't a woman in this audience who hasn't experienced what's in this cartoon in their own lives. I've personally experienced workplace invisibility, as I can't tell you the number of times I have received letters to my house addressed like this. You might say it's carelessness. However, these letters are coming from my employers who should know that I'm actually a physician. And just to let you know, the appropriate way to address an envelope to two physicians would be Doctors Timothy and Linda Cripe. And if you're feeling really frisky or you want to score points with the lady, I would address them Doctors Linda and Tim Cripe. So another thing that needs to be addressed before that glass ceiling can be broken is gender inequities as a result of the professional playground, as I call it. In order to climb the ladder of academic success, we need to have access to people in senior leadership roles. And unfortunately for women, many very important meetings are taking place on golf courses, on bike paths, and on basketball courts. I've witnessed this firsthand. It's either that, or somebody really thinks my husband is really fun to play golf with. So, why should we all care about this, all of us? I'll give you 4 good reasons. The first one being Virginia Apgar. She was a pioneer in the clinical evaluation of newborns. And those of us in pediatrics here are very familiar with the Apgar score. Helen Taussig, who was considered the founder of the field of pediatric cardiology, my own field, was a pioneer in treating children with cyanotic congenital heart disease. And Stella van Praagh, who's near and dear to my heart as my own personal mentor, was a pioneer in defining the anatomy of congenital heart disease. She could also cook a mean baklava. And Janet Rowley, who was a pioneer in discovering that cancer is a disease of the genome. All 4 of these women persevered during times that were very difficult and against amazing odds. But I need to ask you a very important question. How many Virginia Apgars, Helen Taussigs, Stella van Praaghs, and Janet Rowleys were lost to this world because of sexual harassment, discrimination, and marginalization? Why should we care? We should care because as a society, we cannot afford to lose the voice of the future talent that is coming up. So, what can we do about it? Men have the power, and I really don't blame them for not wanting to give it up. But what we need to do is we need to ask them to share. And as we learned in kindergarten, sharing is fundamental. So, some little practical strategies are to actively promote women to leadership roles. We need to ensure salary equity. I heard Brooke Baldwin on CNN last week talk about this, and one of the things she proposed was that women start sharing their salaries with other women. She said that this was culturally taboo, and for her it had been a little difficult, but she said that's the only way that the women are going to gain the knowledge needed to negotiate well. And as we know, knowledge is power. We also need to ensure voices are heard equitably in the workplace. We need to call out bad behavior at meetings when we see it. John, I am so thrilled that you agree about Susie's plan that was proposed 5 minutes ago by Susie. We need to make sure that John isn't stealing Susie's ideas. Women also need to start taking ownership for their own vocabulary. Instead of saying, I might be able to do that, or I think I could, we need to say, I'm going to own it. I've got this, and it's mine. We also need to build a network of women colleagues. Here's a group that I became very close with this past year in my ELAM course. I call them up on the phone all the time. They're at a variety of different institutions across the United States. I have really come to tremendously value their input. We must recruit like-minded men to champion change. I have to admit, I've been blessed with an incredible spouse to go on this journey with me. And I know that many men want to come on this journey with us. We must reach down and pull up the young talent. These ladies' voices are important, and they need to be heard. So I will end by re-showing one of the slides that I showed earlier today. I've changed the colors up a bit, and I'm going to propose to you the one final question. Do you see anything wrong with this slide? Thank you.